Good evening. Kevin, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I have a beautiful sunset behind me, so I hope you all don't mind. It's one of the perks of working here at the city. You get to see wonderful sunsets. I want to welcome each and every one of you to the virtual town hall meeting regarding the North Beach Community Redevelopment Agency. My name is Raquel Williams, and I serve as the Economic Development Director here at the city. I would like to recognize Commissioner Minor and his aide, Amadeus Huff. They're both on the call this evening, as well as Commissioner Steinberg, Commissioner Samuelin, Michelle Berger, Chief of Staff to Mayor Gelber, Diana Fontanti, aide to Commissioner Gongora, as well as Eric Carpenter, Assistant City Manager. And if there's anyone who I have failed to recognize, please let me know. You can raise your hand and Kevin will let the audience know that you are participating this evening.
And Raquel, we have Vice Mayor Gongora has also just joined.
Welcome, Vice Mayor. Many of you have been engaged during this and previous segments of the journey toward fully establishing the North Beach CRA. Tonight marks the 8th public meeting over a 3-month period focused on the preparation of the redevelopment plan, a document required by state statute and Miami-Dade County. After the work in progress meeting during the January charrette, the City Commission took legislative action to create the North Beach CRA on February 10, 2021. The city has sought input from North Beach residents and stakeholders at various phases and stages of the CRA development process, and this moment is no different. In preparation for this meeting, and in addition to digital notifications, the city sent invitational mailers to 25,000 households and commercial properties in North Beach. In a few minutes, our consultant team will unveil the draft redevelopment plan and discuss the concepts and strategies therein. I want to emphasize that the plan will be in draft form until the City Commission adopts the final plan in May 2021. The draft redevelopment plan is available online at miamibeachfl.gov/North Beach CRA. Please review the plan and provide feedback or ask questions in the comments section at the bottom of the page. We will respond to all inquiries and suggestions. As we continue to refine the draft plan, next week, the administration will ask the City Commission to refer the draft plan in substantial form to the Planning Board to determine concurrency and alignment with the city's comprehensive plan, which is also a statutory requirement. As a reminder, the city has been given a 1-year time period from July 2020 to return to Miami-Dade County with a redevelopment plan for consideration and approval by the Board of County Commissioners. At this time, I would like to go over the timeline for this evening and then turn it over to our consultant team. Next slide. So after our consultant team goes over the approval process, we will then discuss highlights from the CRA's situation review. The team will then dive into the goals and strategies for the CRA and also discuss tax increment financing. Lastly, we'll have a discussion of next steps just before an opportunity for public questions and answers. Next slide. This time I'd like to introduce you to our consultant team. Many of you have gotten familiar with them over the past couple of months, but for those of you who are new to the group and to this process, we have Daedalus Advisory Services, Dover Colin Partners, as well as Redevelopment Management Associates. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to them. Next slide.
All right, so hi everyone, Sean Bourgeois from Daedalus Advisory Services. And I'm gonna walk you through first, just a quick reminder of what we're all here to do, and that's to craft a widely supported redevelopment plan for the CRA that inspires you, the residents, investors, public officials about what's possible for Miami Beach's North Beach neighborhood. Now, as part of this, and you heard Raquel say that we've engaged in quite an extensive public engagement process, but all of this is so we can make sure that we've captured all of your insights as we move through this overall adoption process. And Raquel had mentioned that we started back in July 2019 with the finding of necessity. And it's worth noting that here we are in March 2021, and you'll see as we're closing in on those final dates for adoption. So the County Commission in July 2020 has already accepted the finding of necessity. Just this past February, the City Commission created the CRA, and we're on the edge now of bringing the draft plan to the Planning Board to verify its concurrency with the comprehensive plan. Now, after that, we're rolling fairly quickly towards our May City Commissioners review and adoption of the plan itself, before finally going to the county for their approval of the plan and the various interlocal agreement and trust fund. But that's all sort of at the policy process. If we take it down a notch and look at what the team as a whole, together with the city, have done with you, the public, we've spent since December through now in research, engagement, writing, and really trying to make sure that we've met with as many people as we can meet with, have captured and synthesized the information in ways that are useful for the plan, so that between March and April, we can refine what it is we've found, so that we've gotten the plan as aligned as we can with all the various stakeholder inputs and, in general, the various push-pull that comes with making a big public document, so that we're ready for May, June, and July's adoption meetings. And we're on path for that. So thank you for your help so far in supporting us through. It's been a very tedious process of work to make sure that we've captured everyone's insights. And so now we're going to turn that over. This portion of the project presentation is going to go to Sharita Allen from RMA. So Sharita, you are next up.
Terrific. Thank you, Sean.
You're welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I just want to talk a little bit about sort of what a CRA can do. And understanding what's legally allowed in the statutes is very important when it comes to laying out the goals and strategies based on the existing conditions. So again, Florida state statute allows us to, as a CRA, once it's formed, it goes through all of these things. And again, these will come up in the redevelopment plan. There's a particular section, and I'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide or two, that talks about administration and governance. And all of that goes back to exactly what a CRA can do. And so again, it's all of those transactions it's allowed to engage in. It's how it handles real estate. It's how it invests the funds. It's how it's spending taxpayer dollars. There are very clear boundaries and parameters around what a CRA can do. Next slide, please. Along with that, there are clear parameters around what a CRA cannot do. And again, it just goes back to identifying your finding of necessity, what we've discovered, looking at the existing conditions, look at what the state statutes allow, and then saying, okay, there are some other things that are not allowed, and identifying those. And so all of those are here. We've covered those before, and they are in the plan in detail under section 2. You'll go to the next slide, please. And so this is the structure of the plan. This is sort of high level, how you want to look at and review the plan. It's 100 pages or more, a little over 100 pages. And so again, when you're looking at this plan, the first part, again, is just the overview, executive summary, where the boundaries are, sort of the introduction to the area, what we're looking at, administration and governance. Again, this is a very detailed section on what state statutes allow and looking at how CRAs will be governed and how they will administer the funds and all of those things underneath it. Again, that section will go into, in its section 2, what you can do and also what you cannot do. So once we know sort of, okay, Florida's telling us, the Act's telling us what we can do, now we go into, let's look at the situation. Let's look at the existing conditions of an area. So we had the finding of necessity, we know what the law allows, and now we're looking at, okay, what are the existing conditions? What are the demographics, the population? What's the housing stock? Percentage of renters, percentage of homeowners, looking at the real estate, vacancy rates, rent rates, age of structures, all of those kinds of things. Neighborhood analysis, looking at sort of the boundaries of the CRA and looking at, okay, where are the distinct neighborhoods that have unique characteristics, that have assets that you want to preserve, some you want to enhance, some issues you want to mitigate. But again, it's just looking at the situational review is where we really get into, this is the data. So you're going to see a lot of numbers and charts and graphs and percentages. And again, these are important because they provide a framework for putting together your goals and strategies. So again, when you're looking at the existing conditions, try not to skip over that section, because that section really and truly kind of lays the foundation that says, you know what? You know, we've got Class C buildings, we've got Class B buildings. Okay, well, maybe we have some strategies to upgrade those buildings. But again, you don't start with your strategies. You really kind of look at your existing situation, and that's where that whole review comes in. And then the last section, we'll start to get into sort of the strategies. And again, identifying high-level goals, identifying implementation strategies, and looking at those strategies that are, some of them very detailed from other plans, some of them, most of them coming out of sort of the public input, and then looking at sort of how you put those together so that they go back to, we've got strategies and goals that are tied to our existing conditions that we heard from both the data and the residents that are legally allowed under the statute. So that's kind of how you'll see this 100-page plan structured. Next slide, please. And then here are some highlights. Again, this is a section that I, you know, data nerds love this section. Some people like to skip this section, but I do think it's an important section because again, it's what the data is telling us that we need to have and preserve, or that we need to mitigate and remove. So that's looking at the existing conditions. Smaller population, we've got a large number of renters in the area, you know, compared to, we've got average incomes that are lower when you compare it to areas around the CRA, and then also Miami-Dade County as a whole. And then looking at higher educational attainment levels. It's looking at real estate, what we have in real estate. It's looking at those core neighborhoods. Again, entire section on, here are the core neighborhoods, here's the character, here's what's important about them, here's what's special about them, here's what we want to keep about them, those kinds of things. And then looking at beautification and infrastructure. That goes back to looking at sort of the quality of life pieces, because we're talking traffic flow, pedestrian safety, all those other things, because we recognize when redevelopment starts to happen, you want to improve the quality of life, or if you've got a great one now, you want to preserve that. So that's where that beautification and infrastructure piece really comes into play. And then the next slide. Perfect. CRA Redevelopment Plan concepts. So again, it all kind of builds on each other so that when you're reading through the plan, just keep in mind sort of where we started and then how we're going through this plan. And so when we get to the redevelopment plan concepts, these are basic concepts in economic development that have to be considered sort of within the framework of your existing conditions. It's also within the framework of where you want to go. And so that's looking at land, labor, access to capital. It's looking at your current zoning and your regulation. It's looking at existing neighborhood impacts and projects. It's looking at previous master plans. It's looking at sort of that, what we call at the bottom of this wheel, the regional intergovernmental collaboration. Like, what's the state doing that the CRA could piggyback on? What are the resiliency efforts that the city of Miami Beach is doing that the city CRA should participate in? Again, it's looking at all of those different pieces, but recognizing they don't happen in a vacuum. They happen along with what the law allows, what the existing conditions and the data are telling us, and then what residents say they want. So if you'll go to the next slide, please. So that's going to take us to our goals and strategies. So we've kind of layered all of this. And when you get to the goals and strategies, I want to make sure that we all recognize there are sort of different approaches to it. And what's important about this is I say you've got small costs versus significant costs. So when a CRA is first formed, you'll start to see some low cost, I call them low cost, no cost efforts. And some of these are strategies that could be quickly implemented that don't cost a lot. And so what's important to recognize is there are a number of those strategies that you're about to hear about from Adrienne when she takes over. But to balance that, there are also some very high cost strategies too. And you have to have a healthy balance of both. So you will see some small costs and you're going to see some that have significant costs. Same short-term, long-term. You're going to see some short-term initiatives that could be implemented in 1 to 3 years. You're going to have some initiatives that honestly are going to take 10 to 30 years. I mean, it will take sort of the lifespan of the CRA for some of them to get implemented. But recognize that while these short-term things are going on, there are all of these different strategies happening in the background that are focused on some of those long-term goals. And you'll hear about some of those. And then finally, there's some routine approaches. And then you're going to see some bold approaches. And so again, routine approaches, you know, every CRA is going to do marketing and branding and some of those things. That's kind of routine. But you're also going to see some bold approaches. And we heard some of those in our public input sessions. And some of those are included in it. And so our next presenter is going to be Adrienne, and she's going to walk through the CRA goals and the strategies. And so how we kind of got to where we are.
Good evening, everyone. Adrienne Esteban with RMA. So we have 6 main CRA goals in this CRA plan. The first goal deals with economic development. Our second one deals with resiliency and infrastructure. Our third is cultural arts, branding and marketing and communications. Our fourth deals with the neighborhood character. The goal 5 is dealing with quality of life. And our 6th goal is deals with leveraging resources. So our first goal is to provide economic development opportunities for businesses, property owners, and residents. We break these down into 2 main sections, the first being business attraction and retention, and the second being real estate. So for business attraction, we want to focus first on those things that we can do in the short term, especially when it deals with inventory of existing businesses and identifying gaps in the merchandise mix. Then we also want to work with existing business owners to help them assess their needs and to provide programs that help spotlight them and get them more business. And then also we want to, once we identify those gaps that we're missing, we want to work on strategies to help attract new businesses to the CRA. In regards to real estate, what we want to be able to do there is to better utilize public lands, identify our priority areas for redevelopment, and then engage in public-private partnerships. As you can see, there's a lot more bullets on here, but I won't read all of them individually to not take up too much time. But those are our main implementation strategies that we are recommending in this plan dealing with economic development. And what that looks like is seeing facade programs, seeing brochures to attract new businesses. Like I mentioned, making sure the CRA understands the public real estate assets that are in the area so that they can continue to increase the tax base of the CRA, opening new businesses, having new opportunities, workforce development opportunities for residents, and bringing additional capital to the CRA. Our second goal is about investing in resiliency and infrastructure. Again, we break it down into 2 categories. Our first is resiliency and sustainability, and our second deals with infrastructure and transportation. For resiliency and sustainability, again, I'm not going to go through all of the bullets, but some of the main ones that we have are to implement adaptation projects that would include things like raising the streets, as well as developing resiliency incentive programs to help property owners and business owners adapt to climate change that we know is affecting South Florida. For infrastructure and transportation, that's going to be things like exploring funding for parking structures and garages, making sure surface lots are being utilized for the highest and best use, and then investing in streetscape type of initiatives so that you see pedestrian activity. Here you have some images of garages, complete street concepts, including lighting, protected bike lanes, additional mass transit opportunities. So those are the kinds of things that this section talks about. Our goal 3 is to strengthen the cultural arts, branding and marketing, and communication. And again, we've broken it down into arts and cultural heritage tourism, marketing and communications, branding, and then promotional activities and events. For arts and cultural heritage tourism, this area of North Beach actually already has quite a few assets, as you all are aware, that really promote their cultural arts, including the band shell. So it's really just working on bringing additional opportunities to that area that deal with cultural facilities and partners. For branding, this includes developing a logo and then a campaign strategy for that area. A suggestion that we heard from the public was focusing on the music and also the MIMO architecture of the area. For marketing communications, that starts with having a very strategic marketing plan and then actively promoting what the CRA is doing, not only to residents, but to interested businesses and developers. And then making sure that message is out there through social media means, website, making sure it's on the CRA's website and the city's website, and then just being able to get that message out there. For promotional activities and events, one of the main suggestions that we heard there was to develop a signature community event, again, tied to one of the cultural arts aspects of the area, especially because the North Beach area has such a rich history in music as well as architecture. So what that looks like is having public art on building surfaces, having special events where you're drawing new residents as well as visitors, and having a place for your existing residents as well to really partake in the cultural assets that are within the community. And then again, putting that message out there through things like leasing brochures, logos, making sure that everyone knows what a great place North Beach is. Our fourth goal deals with protecting and enhancing the neighborhood character. We looked at the 4 main neighborhoods that are within the North Beach, including Town Center, the Normandy Isles Fountain area, the West Lots, and the North Shore. In general, though, the things that we're focusing on in this plan are creating housing infill programs, as well as partnering to provide affordable housing and home ownership opportunities in the area. For Town Center, it's really just implementing some of those things that were in the NOBI plan, which is creating a walkable main street, as well as enhancing the community's character for a mixed-use, vibrant community. In the Normandy Isle Fountain area, the city has already done a great job of starting the beginnings of seeing the redevelopment of that area through the plaza improvements. So the recommendations for this area include just expanding on those, bringing more opportunities for shop fronts and retail and commercial, as well as housing. In the West Lots, this is where we're looking to combine active uses as well as sub-commercial into that area where there's an existing park right next door, and then engaging in public-private partnerships as the lots get developed for some of the locations where commercial could be enhanced in that area. In the North Shore, this is where we see a lot of partnerships with multifamily properties to make improvements, and then constructing affordable and workforce housing in the area. Our fifth goal deals with improving the quality of life for residents and visitors. And we see two main aspects to this, the first being community spaces and the second being safety. For community spaces, this is where the CRA could partner with the city to implement parks projects and really improve pedestrian pathways, especially along the waterways. This would include like the Crab Valley, and as well as exploring developing more green space, either in alleyways or parklets, or even some of the smaller park elements. In dealing with safety, this is where we want to work with the City of Miami Beach Police Department, as well as install lighting to enhance the public safety aspect. We also want to possibly establish or reignite a neighborhood watch program. So what that looks like is just having areas for people to gather, having opportunities for the residents to focus on their health, like through community gardens, developing, like I said, those walkways along the waterways, and then having a presence of safety in the area. Our goal 6 has to do with leveraging resources, and that's through through both funding and then financing and implementation. The funding is mostly going to come through our tax increment financing, but there's also a way to leverage those resources by working with public-private partnerships, working with private partners, and then also looking at grants, business improvement districts, and bonds to finance some of that redevelopment. And Sean is now going to go over our tax increment financing.
Excellent, thank you. All right, so back to TIF 101. So Adrian did a great job in walking you through all the different ways that we can fund the CRA. And now we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into what does the TIF mean, how does it work, and what are the projections at a high level for this particular CRA. So if you recall, I showed this slide during the charrette, but it's worth reviewing. So if you have a building in a base year, so the year that you start your CRA, and that building is worth $1 million as of the base year, and it has taxes due of $2,500 as of that year, by definition, there is no incremental growth over that initial $2,500 tax payment. Press the spacebar, Adrian. But in the second year, or the year following the base year, which is technically TIF year 1, let's assume that our building grows by $50,000 in value. So now its tax bill is jumped by $125. Press the spacebar. And let's assume we fast forward all the way to year 30. Now our building has doubled in value, and assuming that nothing has changed in the tax rates or anything else, our taxes due are now $5,000. You'll see we've doubled the taxes due. So our increment is now $2,500. Press the spacebar. So what happens is for every year that the TIF is active, you get some incremental growth if there was positive property tax growth within the CRA district. And some portion of that flows to the CRA trust fund. Not 100%, but most of it depends on a bunch of other factors. But for the most part, you can think of this as being what fills your CRA trust fund. Next slide, please. A slightly more conceptual way to think about that is you have buildings that exist, and if you see the green dot, the TIF creation date, these buildings that are in existence have a tax history, and over time they've gone up in value. And at a certain point in time, that value is frozen when the CRA is created. And the additional value after that date that is created flows to the TIF trust fund, with the frozen value still being the baseline that stays with the city and county. Some portion of that captured value again flows to the trust fund until the ending date, the red dot. And after that, you have the total of all the property taxes then revert as they normally would in the pre-TIF period to the taxing authorities, right? So if you can imagine my single building before being multiplied by all the buildings in your CRA district and any future development that might happen, all of that provides the fuel, so to speak, for the TIF that allows you to do and undertake all of the strategies that you heard Adrienne explain earlier. Next slide, please. So in our case, if we assume, as this is true, our base year value, our taxable values for our CRA district stand in 2021 at $1.477 billion. So if we make some assumptions, as we did, about likely property tax growth in the early years, the middle years, and the later years of the TIF's life, we can make some estimates about how the taxable values themselves grow. And then if we capture just the incremental portion of that, how much are the taxable value increments and property tax increments growing? So in our assessment, we've come up with a total of $216 million in potential property tax increments over the 30-year TIF life. Now, there's some caveats here, so we're going to go through those. Next slide, please. The first caveat is, and this is the incremental income to the CRA. What we should know is, assuming we're capturing 50% of the increment for the CRA, and the rest going back to the taxing authorities, you'll notice that in year one, our CRA income is not very high. We've got $112,000. But by year 6, that's already grown to 1.2 million. And by the time we get to the end of our 30-year TIF life, we're at just above $7 million per year. Now, it's worth noting, I mentioned there were some caveats. So caveat 1, these are nominal numbers. We don't account for inflation in these figures, right? And that's important because many times you'll look at $105 million, which is our total here, and think that that's in today's dollars, but it's not. It's the total of all nominal values summed across 30 years. Go to the next slide. So one way to imagine what I'm talking about is, here is that same string of numbers that I just showed you, the CRA's income. And if we look at it, as it grows over time, imagine we put 20% error bars on it, which just means plus or minus in any year, we could be off by 20%. This is what the string of estimates would look like. And you see, again, we grow to just over $7 million. Now, what happens if, go to the next slide, Adrienne. What happens if we adjust for present value? That means we take inflation into account. Well, you'll notice that we've already reduced our nominal income in today's dollars by year 30 to just under 4 million. So it's important to keep in mind that the dollar values in particular, as you go farther out in time, are not equivalent to today's dollars. And there's yet one more wrinkle. Go to the next slide. What happens if we have a recession? You remember those, right? We used to have them all the time. Well, we've got 30 years of TIF life. Let's assume that we had one single recession, and we had it early in the CRA's life, and we lost 10% of property values in that single year. And the following year, we had a return to normalcy, but zero property value growth. And then every other input was exactly the same as in the earlier models. On a nominal basis, that's what this shows. That would mean after that single event, we are back by 2051, the end of our 30-year period, to being just under $5 million in nominal terms. Now, just as these numbers can go down with recessions, new large-scale developments can also lift them higher, in many cases materially higher. So it's the interplay of those forces over time that are ultimately going to determine how much money the CRA has at its disposal. But conceptually, this gives you a very good projected view of how the incremental dollars accrue, in particular, how low it starts in the early years before really ramping up later as the compounding effects really catch up with you. So those points are good to keep in mind as we in particular go to open up the public portion of Q&A here in a few minutes. Go to our next slide, Adrienne. So where are we now? we got next steps. We're going to listen for more of your comments, and that being both stakeholders, public, city officials, elected officials. We're still listening, we're still editing, we're still refining. We're going to seek, as we noted earlier, concurrence from the planning board, that we're in line with the comprehensive plan. We'll continue to have TIF discussions with the city. We'll meet with the CRA advisory board and present the plan to them, and of course engage with both the city of Miami Beach as well as Miami-Dade County for the various adoption meetings that are needed. So between now and roughly May, we will be making our iterations, and we're listening, we're here. So as part of listening, we're going to start off the Q&A session in just a minute. So as we flip to the next slide, we're going to get ready to turn it over. And Adrian and I are here. We also have others on call if needed. So with that, Kevin, would you do the honors, please?
Sure. So good evening, everybody. My name is Kevin Polito. I'm the Neighborhood Affairs Manager at the City of Miami Beach. And what we're going to do this evening is we're going to go through our Q&A. We ask that everybody please keep your questions and comments related to tonight's discussion. And if you could please keep them within 2 minutes. We do have over 100 guests joining us. So at 2 minutes a person, that could be quite a lot of time. So what you're going to do is at the bottom of your Zoom, if you're on the desktop, click raise your hand. If you're calling by phone, click *9. And those of you who are using Zoom on an iPad or iPhone or a mobile device, if you, on the top right, you should have 3 little dots. Click the little dots and then you'll see the option to raise your hand. So with that, again, we'll go ahead and 2 minutes per person, and we'll start with our first caller, Adriana Hernandez.
Hi, this is Ariana Hernandez, anthropology, PhD, also urban studies research person. I have just a couple of comments. First, I think the consultative process has not been conducted. There have been no meetings whatsoever to decide the boundaries of the CRA. Unlike other CRAs in the county, here there haven't been any meetings at all to decide on the boundaries. So we have a situation in which North Shore people fought to be excluded, and I thought we won it, but part of the North Shore all of a sudden is back in. Parkview Island wants to be in, and they're not given the time of day. And they, frankly, they have the worst indicators in the area. And constituents in West Normandy also would like to be part of the CRA, and they were never given an option. And so the boundaries really, they need to be revised and they need to be established in consultation with people. And consultation with people means that you include everybody beyond people with access to Zoom and beyond people who speak English. 2/3 of the North Shore speak only Spanish at home. These people have not had any meeting that they could attend and understand. I urge you to look at the finding of necessity because it's outdated, because it really doesn't make any case for anything. It has no data. And like I said, the boundaries are up for discussion. The West Lots, incidentally, we just heard that, this lady that works for you talked about commercialization of the West Lots. That raised many people's hairs up. The West Lots are, they were slated as a park. People have expressed repeatedly that they need to be a park and that they need to be green and that they need to be excluded from the CRA. They also refer to the North Shore. The North Shore was removed. The North Shore and the West Lots are not in the finding of necessity. So if you want to include them, you need a new finding of necessity. So, and also lastly, the county commissioners voted to put this process forth after discussing and deciding that the West Lots will be excluded. So I urge you to go back to the drawing board and on this matter of the boundaries.
Thank you, Dr. Hernandez. We're gonna go to our next caller. It's gonna be Mr. Larry Schaefer.
Hello?
Hello? There
Hello.
we go, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Hi, this is Larry Schaefer. Like Ariana said, we believe that this whole process has been a sham. It's not a charrette, it's been a sham. We have been through Zoom meetings and not in-person hearings. We have, like as she said, only English only and not Spanish. And then most of all, my greatest objection is that the entire process has not been conducted in the sunshine. The state of Florida has well-established sunshine laws that require meetings to take place in public. The meetings where the boundaries were drawn for the CRA were not in public. We never had the opportunity to participate in drawing the boundaries. And I personally believe that the finding of necessity is so flawed that it will be thrown out by a court. Now, I say court because tomorrow I'm going to call Ashley Moody, the state of Florida Attorney General, and file a complaint against the city of Miami Beach and the county, Miami-Dade County. And we can all deal with Ashley Moody about this. I've had about enough of this garbage, of these consultants coming in who know nothing about our neighborhood and pretending to speak about what we need, especially given that we've been silenced for so long and stuck behind screens and haven't had the opportunity to meet you in person and tell everyone involved in this on the city side how unhappy we are with your performance. I had a consulting company in the past, and we've got 3 consultants here. Why is it that no one at the city can do any work? Why do they have to hire consultants to do it all the time? We've got, what is it, Bend Over Coal, and we've got Daedalus and RMA, each with their own issues. Some of them don't have any experience at all with setting up CRAs. So I'm going to give you guys the opportunity to discuss the potential lawsuit against the city of Miami Beach and against the Miami-Dade County, because you're really making it more difficult for yourselves. You should throw away the finding of necessity and redraw the boundaries. I'm done.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. Next up, we have John Alleman.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Hi, good evening.
Thank you. This is John Alleman. I'm a 7-year resident of Miami Beach at this point, and I am a North Mid-Beacher. So I live just a few blocks from the North Beach boundary. I wanted to give you a couple of pieces of, my thoughts on this. First of all, I want to thank you all. The North Beach Master Plan certainly contemplated a CRA. And in spite of last 2 callers' resistance to having a CRA in North Beach, it was a pivotal component of that plan, which we had more than 1,000 unique individuals, residents participating in the creation of the master plan, and the CRA was a component of that. So 2 thoughts I just wanted to share on it as an aside on the CRA. Please don't forget about us in Mid-Beach. I think there's quite a bit of latent demand for services, restaurants, personal household types of services going to North Beach. And so the voice of Mid-Beach and the participation of Mid-Beach certainly can help play a role shaping going forward. And secondly, on the 50%, I keep seeing the 50%, and it could be that you're just using that for explanatory purposes. I hope that we, in our negotiations with the county, will go for more. I don't remember what our percentage holdbacks were for south of 5th or Lincoln Road, but those were 2 incredibly successful CRAs, not just for Miami Beach, but probably across the entire state of Florida. And we should probably look back and see what holdback percentages we've been able to negotiate in the past and aim a little bit higher. Again, thank you all for the great work. This is going to mean quite a lot, as I said, not just for North Beach, but for our entire city. And I appreciate your work. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll go to our next caller, Milan Andres. Hi there, caller. Can you hear us? So that's again, Milan.
Yes.
There you go. It looks like he just unmuted. Hi there.
Yes. Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Hi, good afternoon.
Yes. My name is Millín Nobregas. I live in 7440 Harding, that is within the CRA area. I agree with the first 2 callers, Ariana Hernandez and Larry Schaefer, as to the legality of the process of the CRA, especially the issue of the finding of necessity. I am an attorney, and it seems to me to be very defective when you put the reasoning and the facts. But since we are in this meeting And apparently it is for questions. I want to ask two questions. Question number one is, when are we going to have a concrete idea of what redevelopment means, meaning what is going to be changed in our neighborhood? And the second question is whether this redevelopment and these changes are going to be done property by property, or they're going to be done in big pieces of our neighborhood, like in town center. Can anyone answer that, please?
Excellent, thank you. So we will go ahead and see if we have Raquel there. Hi, Raquel, if you could maybe speak to the timing of the redevelopment.
Sure. So as Sean mentioned before, and I think Sharia touched on it as well, there are various constraints that will help to determine the prioritization of projects that will utilize tax increment financing. So as Sean mentioned, when we first start receiving funds into the trust fund, it's going to be at a lower level. And as we progress year over year, we're looking at increases. And those are just projections. So as the revenue is generated, the CRA board, who are the city commissioners, they will make a determination on how to prioritize the funding. And that will happen, with staff recommendation as well. And, we're going to be looking at the revenue that's generated in order to make some decisions about how we prioritize projects. So at this time, we would not be able to determine if we're going to do property by property, or a large property or a small property. That's not something that we contemplate in this plan. This plan speaks about the strategies that we can use to implement change in the redevelopment area. You asked about a concrete idea of what redevelopment means. I think that the plan offers a wide range of implementation strategies that will support redevelopment. And I think the plan outlines the intent of the city staff, as well as what we feel to be the intent of the residents and stakeholders who participated in the charrette process and the planning process. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. So we'll go to our next caller. I just want to thank all our callers. We've really been able to keep it within 2 minutes. For those of you who would like to ask a question or maybe leave a comment, please click the raise your hand button in Zoom. And if you're talking or calling via the phone, click *9. So our next caller is Omar Jimenez.
Good evening, can you hear me?
Yes, hi.
Good evening. The Inspector General recently reviewed the West lots and found the West lots were given to the state in 1989 with this clause: the above described property shall be used and maintained for public recreational use for which it was conveyed in perpetuity. Parkview Island is located on 73rd Street on the doorstep of the CRA boundary. The main reason why Parkview Island was left out of the CRA boundary was that the finding of necessity did not cover Parkview Island. Why is Parkview Island different from any other neighborhood in North Beach? Parkview Island has one-way streets, inadequate parking, and no sidewalks on half of the island streets, to name a few of the ongoing concerns, which negatively impact residents' quality of life every day. Parkview Island is the only neighborhood left with an active no-contact water advisory for over a year. I established the Parkview Island Sustainable Development Association in early 2020 due to these ongoing serious problems. There are many other issues on the island that could really use the assistance from the CRA. Parkview Island residents demand to be treated equally and fairly to the rest of our neighbors in North Beach. Revise the CRA boundary to include Parkview Island. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Omar, for those comments. And we're going to go next to Marguerite Ramos. Marguerite?
Hello, good evening. Thank you
Hi,
for
good
that.
evening.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm just very curious. I would love to ask the consultants, why are they only asking for 50% of the tax to be returned from the county? It was my understanding that we were going to ask for the full amount. And I think that's what the other CRAs in the city of Miami Beach do, have. So I'm just wondering if I could get an answer on that.
We were just being conservative during our first runs, rather than present to the public higher numbers that we may not achieve. Again, we've not finished the discussions with the public officials needed to finalize that, but we could go with the base numbers, and that would be at least safe for the initial presentation of figures.
Thank you. So our next caller is Betsy Perez.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for allowing me to speak. And thank you to Raquel and Kevin and all of the staff for pointing out to the public all of the advertisement and notice, which has been extensive and very transparent regarding everything about the CRA. I'm not sure what the complaints are about. There is no silence. This is absolutely not the case. Before COVID, I was at several public meetings where hundreds attended at the youth center. I've been on many Zooms, and it's always been out in the open. So it pains me to hear people saying that this has been a quiet process. On the contrary, it's been very out in the open. It's also not lost on us North Beachers that those who want to expand the boundaries fought against this CRA in the beginning. I wish in the beginning that instead of working against the CRA, that those who opposed it would have listened and agreed that it was going to be beneficial to us all, which we see now with your proposal. It's wonderful. I love all of your goals, especially goal 3 regarding cultural arts. I think that North Beach could be a wonderful cultural arts center. And I go across to see Wynwood area, and I think, gosh, this could have been on Miami Beach, and maybe it can, and maybe the CRA can help all of this come to fruition. So I look forward to seeing everything that you will put up on your site, and thank you so much, everyone, for working so hard on this.
Thank you for those comments. And we're going to go to our next caller, Daniel Veitia.
Hi, good afternoon. I want to first thank Raquel. What an amazing job putting this team together. The preliminary plan looks great, looks comprehensive, clearly understanding the needs and the benefits that the CRA can have on our community. So you have me very excited about what can happen year 10 through 30. In the meantime, I'd like to make sure you continue to plan to have the resources necessary to start working on all these initiatives that you outline in your plan. I think there's a lot to be done here in North Beach to help us revitalize our neighborhood and bring prosperity. And I encourage all of you to continue the hard work. There are plenty in this community that are relying on the work that you're doing and value the importance of the CRA and the impact it will have on our neighborhood and our quality of life and the safety of our families. So thank you so much, and please continue the good work. Very excited to see what happens next.
Thank you for those comments, and we're going to go to David. David, if you could just state your full name for the record.
David Sexton. Sorry about that.
Hi, David.
Hey, Kevin. I wanted to thank you guys for coming today, and this is such a cool process, and we're all excited. Specifically, something that I heard on one of the meetings that we had was that the CRA could not be used to make capital improvements on city-owned properties. And I thought that I heard in one of those conversations that that would preclude us from being able to use CRA funds to improve the Byron Carlisle. Is that, did I understand that accurately?
Thank you, David. Let me see, Raquel, if you could answer that.
Sure. So investments of the TIF will be made on a case-by-case basis. And the Byron Carlisle could potentially be a project that CRA funding could go toward. So I'm not sure what the context was when you heard the statement about capital projects. There are certain regulations and stipulations outlined by the state statute that dictates how the CRA may be able to fund capital projects that are already on the city's capital projects list. And so I will say that it's case by case, and it's not something that's impossible for the Byron Carlisle.
Thank you. Our next caller is username Copy Producer. If you could please state your full name for the record. Oops. I'll send you a request to unmute, so I'm just going to ask you to unmute. Just go ahead and click OK. Again, copy producer. If you're on Zoom, on the bottom left, there's a mic and you can unmute yourself. Copy producer, I'll come back to you. If you could just raise your hand again if you want to speak. We're going to go to Earnin. Again, thank you everybody for keeping your comments within 2 minutes. It's really greatly appreciated. For those of you who have any questions or comments, now's your time. Please click raise your hand on Zoom or *9 via the phone. If you're on an iPhone or mobile device, there's a menu. You have to click the 3 dots and then you'll see the raise your hand feature. So Earnin and then copy producer may be our last caller. So for anyone else who there we go. We have a few people jumping on now. So Earnin.
Hello, my name is Erin Gaskin. I'm an attorney. I have lived on Parkview Island since 2011. I just have a question. Basically, I wanted to know why Parkview Island was not included in the boundaries of necessity. There's a long laundry list of issues here on Parkview Island, from seawalls crumbling to parks being full of homeless people, to parking problems, to small crimes, to sewage and stormwater problems, to utility poles being shared by everyone that are old, to the polluted canals and parking issues. I could go on forever. I recognize that the finding of necessity was based on the definition of blight, and certainly we have blight here on Parkview Island, and it's a real shame. And I wanted the answer to the question as to why Parkview Island was not included in the boundaries. If I could have an answer to that question, thank you.
Sure.
Excellent, thank you so much. Raquel?
Sure. Erin, when the finding of necessity was completed, this was done by a previous consultant. The consultant looked at various indicators as outlined by the state statute, and Parkview Island perhaps did not meet as many of the criteria as maybe some of the other areas at that time, or there could have been some indicators based on the demographics or the property ownership status that could have caused the consultant to not include Parkview Island. We do know that there are opportunities to expand CRA boundaries, and this is done periodically. I've known of CRAs to do this. The CRA that I recently served as executive director for expanded the boundary. So it's not something that we couldn't take a look at again. We do know that the finding was adopted in 2019 by the city, and then in 2020 by the county. And the CRA was created just last month utilizing the existing boundary. So discussions about an expansion of the CRA's boundary could take place, and that's something that would require a updated or new finding of necessity to look at the various areas that could be included. So the city administration is open to going through that process. We just at this time will be moving forward with the CRA's district as it's described today.
Thank you. So we're gonna go to our next Theodore IMC. I've had some people copy producer, and I think I saw Manning had their hands up, so they've disappeared. If you have a question, make sure your hand is up, and it says, it should click raise hand, and then it'll say lower hand. So make sure it says lower hand. I'm gonna go to copy producer. If you could unmute. Just give you a couple seconds there. There you go. So you're unmuted. Can you just state your name?
Yes, my name is Armando Ghedini. And together with my partner, we have developed several buildings here on Bay Drive West on Normandy Island. And at one time, we proposed buying the property known as International Inn on the Bay. This was in 1999, I believe, 98 or 99. We were not denied the purchase, but we were told that it could not be touched because it had a protected, I'm sorry, I'm not from here, so I may not be able to explain it properly, but they told us that it was a MIMO protected or something like that. We now learned that that they will be adding 8 floors to that building, which will be smack in front of one of our buildings and will cover the view of the whole bay. And I'm wondering why the city has no longer is no longer abiding by what was at that time an impossibility.
Well, thank you. So in terms of that, that's a specific project, and it may be going, or it must have gone through the motions already for the Historic Preservation Board. If you could email us at NOBE, NOBECRA at miamibeachfl.gov, we could go ahead and get you information on that specific project. So we'll go to Theodore IMC. If you could state your full name.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, it's Theodore Yemps, Y-E-M-C. Thanks for, I guess, taking my comments. This is the first meeting I've been able to attend because most of the other ones have been during working hours. But I'm a resident of Miami Beach, resident of North Beach, and specifically in Normandy Isles. I just had a question for Sean in regards to his projections of the tax increment financing. He had modeled that even with a solitary recession in Miami, the financing looked rosy. I was just wondering if he has done any modeling for multiple recessions, given that as a nation, we're averaging probably 1 a decade. And then added in the, I guess, unpredictability of sea level rise and the, I guess, outsized impact that has on Miami Beach as a community, if there's enough resilience in the modeling for that financing.
Thank you, Theodore. So we'll turn it over to Sean for that question.
Yeah, short answer, no. We didn't do multiple recessionary events solely for the reason that we don't know when the recessions would hit. And the one that we showed was simply to be indicative about how your in-state TIF revenues are impacted by a single event. When we showed the projections of the TIF revenues, they're not predictions. We're not saying this is the money you will get. This is simply giving you an indicative view of steady state growth under reasonably conservative assumptions, what happens. And that's why we walked you through the nominal, the present value, and then what happens with a single event. I like your comment though, Theodore. It's not a bad idea. And when you take that into account, what that practically means is don't assume that a CRA is a bottomless pot of money. It's going to be impacted by financial storms, just like any other entity that's going to receive property tax revenues. So it's a great point, but the modeling of it is not, we're not trying to be predictive in that way.
Thank you. So we're going to prioritize those who haven't spoken yet. We have Tanya Bott. Tanya?
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I think there is legitimate concern that has been voiced for a number of months about the boundaries of the CRA. I understand the frustration that has been voiced about some folks who were against the CRA in principle in the beginning. We're focusing on that challenge rather than discussing perhaps specifically the CRA boundaries. But I will say that there were 2 different CRA boundaries proposed, and the county even suggested going to a broader boundary. And so as the CRA moves forward, I would encourage all those engaged in trying to make this successful for as many residents and business owners as possible to really have an open and fair conversation sooner rather than later about whether certain things should or should not be included. The West Lots is one area of concern, Parkview Island is another. And to kind of slough this off as, well, you coulda, shoulda, woulda on anybody's part, I'm not casting aspersions or pointing fingers. I just think that if we're moving ahead with something as monumental as the CRA that will impact North Beach specifically and all of Miami Beach generally for the greater good, it would behoove us as a community and as a city to open that conversation up sooner rather than later and try to fix it so everybody feels like they're getting most of what they need. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bott. We're going to go to our next caller. Again, we're just going to prioritize those who have not spoken. We have Sharon. Sharon, if you may state your full name.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, my name is Sharon Weiss. I live at 233 81st Street. I would like to know specifically who drew the boundaries, not this committee or that committee or some nebulous, faceless entity. I would like to know exactly who was on the committee that drew the boundaries, when those meetings took place, and whether or not the public was invited to participate, because as Tanya and other people have just noted, Parkview Island was excluded, the street and the neighborhood where I live was excluded, yet the West Lots, which are neighboring, were included. It seems to me that only parcels owned by certain developers were included, or certain parcels with the potential for development were included, versus an actual and true finding of necessity that would benefit the entire community and not just certain people. And I would have to say that if these boundaries were not drawn in the sunshine, you are on shaky legal ground. And that's just to be forewarned, because people are very upset about this. People that were not included and people that feel that certain areas that were included inappropriately. So I will take your answer about exactly who was on the committee off the, I'll hang up now and write down as you share with the group who was on the committee that drew the boundaries. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Weiss. And if we could, Raquel, if you have some background information that can maybe shared.
Sure. The city engaged a consultant to prepare the finding of necessity, and that consultant was Business Blair. And the finding of necessity was not only approved through a public process by the City Commission, but also through another public process at Miami-Dade County. So in addition, the CRA boundaries were proposed to be expanded, and that was at the suggestion of Miami-Dade County. And when the administration discussed that information and had various community meetings in person, this was pre-COVID, and the community didn't necessarily respond positively to the expanded boundaries as suggested by Miami-Dade County. It's important to note that the expanded boundary suggested by the county did not include Parkview Island either. So I just want to make it clear that there have been public meetings surrounding the finding of necessity and the approval process. And we did engage a consultant to help prepare that finding of necessity. And as I said earlier, the city administration is open to discussions about an expansion of the CRA boundaries, but at this time we are moving forward as we have a timeline from Miami-Dade County to ensure that the redevelopment plan is brought back to them by June for their consideration and approval. It's also important to note that from the time that the city approved the finding of necessity in July 2019, it took an entire year for the county to approve the finding. And so at this point, we would like to move forward, get the CRA established. And as some callers have mentioned, we do know that there is a concern in the community, and we acknowledge that. And we want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to benefit as many stakeholders in our community.
Thank you. So again, we're going to go to our caller here who has not spoken. Again, please keep your comments within 2 minutes. We've had a great run, so thank you for everybody who has kept your comments concise within 2 minutes. Those of you who may wish to speak and have not spoken, if you could please click raise your hand so we could help us identify how much time is left. So again, if you have not spoken and you want to speak, click raise your hand, click the 3 dots if you're on an iPhone or mobile device, and then you'll see the raise your hand feature. And again, if you're on the phone, click *9. So we're going to Manning Salazar. Oh, hold on one moment. Manning, you're having audio difficulty. If you could go on the left, hold on. If you go on the left, Manning, bottom left, right next to your microphone, there's a little arrow. And then if you could select a different microphone, whether it's same as system or if you have an external, go ahead and do that, and that should fix the problem. No, still not. Still can't hear you. Manning, if you click on the little arrow, you have the option to switch to phone audio. You might want to try that. Give you a few minutes to get that sorted.
You can't hear me?
There we go. There you go. You fixed it. Perfect.
Sorry
Now
about
we can hear you.
All right,
So we'll start your timer now.
Hi, thank you very much for allowing me to speak. This is Manning Salazar with the Neighborhood Organization to Save North Beach, No Snob. And so I appreciate that you are addressing the concerns in the community about the boundaries. As is becoming apparent, that's one of the biggest concerns is the boundaries, the areas that are left out, like Parkview. I would also add the north part of Normandy, and areas that are included. And what many of us feel is that the boundaries were chosen in a way that was not did not allow participation of the community. And so that these boundaries people have a lot of objections to for different reasons, and then the larger boundaries for other reasons. And so and that the boundaries weren't decided in a way that again allowed input from the community. So the economic development director spoke to the process. I think anything that any information she can give us to describe in details and more specifics how we would go about changing the boundaries. She mentioned the deadline of June. So, would be something that would happen before then or after then, and what would be required to do it. She mentioned a finding of necessity. So, how could that come about? Because this is something that's very important for the success of the CRA, is that it includes the areas that it should, and doesn't include other areas so that the monies can be used appropriately. I'd also like to ask if there are any meetings or charrettes or outreach to the community that are going to occur in other languages other than English, like in Spanish, for example, and if there's going to be any attempts to do so non-virtually. This media is fine for me, but there's people who are not tech savvy in our community. There was an event that happened on Saturday at the band shell. It was open air. There was social distancing, so maybe something like that. But I think it's important that that this process be as inclusive as possible. And so I'd like to hear what efforts are going to occur in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Manny. Thank you for your comments. Again, if you have not spoken, if you could please click raise your hand. As of right now, everyone who has spoken has spoken. So we don't have any additional callers that have not spoken. And then so we can turn it over to Raquel Williams for some final thoughts. Lastly, we have Raquel Pacheco. So Raquel, you are our final caller.
Kevin,
yes.
if I could just
oh yes, please
provide some additional information. So for the mailers that we have sent out to advertise the charrette process and tonight's meeting, those mailers were English and Spanish, and we did provide accommodations or make accommodations available for in-person meetings during the charrette, and no one called us or emailed us requesting that accommodation. And so we do want to make sure that we are able to communicate with our residents in English and in Spanish. If we have an opportunity to do so, we have made accommodations to do so. If you know anyone, if anyone on the call knows anyone that would like more information in Spanish, please reach out to us. My email, Raquel Williams, RACKELLE Williams at miamibeachfl.gov. I'm available, and I would be more than happy to make more information available. We want to ensure that we have opportunities for our residents to participate, and I know that previous meetings about the CRA have been in person prior to COVID. We do want to make sure that we're following all the safety regulations and ensuring that we meet in a manner that's conducive for enhancing public safety. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we'll jump to our last caller, Raquel Pacheco.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. I've been listening in. I've been part of this process for over a year now. I've tried to participate in everything that I can regarding the CRA, but I think it's pretty obvious at this stage that a lot of people have concerns with the boundaries, and specifically with this assertion that we can adjust the boundaries once the CRA is in effect. So I would like to ask Ms. Williams to please expand on that, because she's not the only person that has said that to me. I've consulted with other very intelligent and experienced people who have worked for the city, and some who have had direct experiences with CRA, who have also suggested that it's easier to adjust the boundaries once the CRA is in effect. But there are a lot of people in the community that I know that just don't believe that they think that we will be forced to jump through hoops and get petitions and go through this really incredibly difficult process, particularly during a pandemic. So Ms. Williams, is there anything you can give us specifics about how exactly we would go about adjusting those boundaries, how we would get, for example, to include Parkview Island once the CRA is in effect, and explain why it's more conducive to doing it once the CRA is in effect than it would be to doing that now? If you could please explain that a little bit further and give us some assurances that this is in fact something that can be done, and give us some direction on how we would go about that, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Similar to the process that established the existing boundary, to expand the CRA boundary, a finding of necessity report would have to be prepared. That finding of necessity report would have to be approved by the CRA board or the city commission. And Miami-Dade County would also have to approve of the finding and accept that there's evidence of slum and or blight in the expanded areas. So this process can take place before the redevelopment plan is adopted or after the redevelopment plan is adopted. However, a delay of adoption of the redevelopment plan, because you can't approve the plan without having an approved boundary. So as a major part of the redevelopment plan is an outline of what the boundaries of the CRA includes. So if the finding of necessity was to be undertaken prior to the redevelopment plan, or the redevelopment plan was halted or stalled in any way, what would happen is the CRA would not be fully developed until sometime in the future. Because of the fact that we are months away from the potential for the county to approve our redevelopment plan, we could see investments into our trust fund in about a year. So we're looking at the base year of 2021. We would have to wait to see what the increment is. And at that point, we would hopefully, if property values increase, we would be able to receive some funding. If we decided not to move forward, or the city commission or CRA board decided not to move forward with the redevelopment plan, and in lieu of waiting for an updated finding of necessity, this could take a year or more, depending on the county's process. I can only speak to what the recent process has been, where from July 2019 to July 2020, that's the time that it took for the county to approve the city's finding of necessity. So I hope I provided a little bit of clarity there. It's not something that is uncommon. CRA boundaries can be expanded. The process would include the same process that we've utilized to establish the existing boundary. So another finding of necessity, another legislative approval process at the city level, CRA level, as well as at the county level.
Thank you, Raquel. So with that, that was our final caller who has not spoken. Again, we are prioritizing those who have not spoken. And I just want to note that if you had a question or comment and maybe didn't want to ask it or didn't raise your hand, you can email us at nobecra at miamibeachfl.gov. You could also visit the CRA webpage at miamibeachfl.gov/North Beach CRA. And there's a questions and comment box there. This presentation is being recorded and will be uploaded to the webpage as well as the draft plan that's on there and the PowerPoint. So with that, I'll turn it to Raquel for some final thoughts.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you to our consultants who have joined us here this evening. Thank you to all of our residents and stakeholders. Thanks to everyone who asked a question or provided some feedback. That's really the stage that we're at right now. We're looking for additional feedback on the plan. We're hopeful that you will take the time to go online and to provide your comments and ask any questions that you may have. As we continue to refine and finalize the draft plan, we are hoping that we capture the sentiment of all of our stakeholders within the guidelines of the state statute and best practices for CRAs. We are getting much closer to, I won't call it the finish line, really it's sort of a leg of the relay that we've been on. And I am hopeful that we will have success at Miami-Dade County with getting the redevelopment plan approved and establishing the trust fund. We will continue to reach out, and we are also available to you if you have any questions or concerns. You may call us. Our contact information is also on the website. I know many of you have reached out to the consultant team and asked follow-up questions and sought clarification. So I'm really grateful for all of the public input. I think that a plan is only as good as the input that you've been able to provide and that we've been able to capture. So at this time, I want to say good night to everyone, and thank you, Kevin, so much for hosting this town hall, and to all of our elected officials who took the time to join us and to listen to the discussion. We look forward to presenting the draft plan in substantial form to you and request that the plan be referred to the planning board for their April meeting. Thank you again.